Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Football Experience, brought to you by On the Pod. I'm here with the main man, Caleb. Caleb, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm flattered by your intro. Thank you for calling me the main man. Got out and had a round of golf this morning. Played poorly by decent standards, but by my standards, not too bad. So I'm feeling all right. How are you, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Look, I don't know much about golf. All I know is that you hit it far, get it in the hole, and you record your score. So all that handicap nonsense, I don't know. So if I was to ask you what your handicap was, is it?
I don't have a hand. I don't have one. So you're safe. I don't go into the handicaps. I just play.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of one of my maths teachers from high school used to talk about golf and he'd go, now ask me my handicap, and then someone would ask him and he'd be like, don't ask. So you just like play.
That's how it is.
Yeah, so you just play with the kids that way. Now I want to get straight into it. We're gonna go with the first midweek match, and I've got quite a bit to say about it, but as the resident Liverpool supporter, I'm going to give the first strike to you. So take it away.
You just got to savor these times where you can beat Manchester United 5-0 and 4-0 because of, for any Liverpool supporter who's around my age, around 30, you just know that you've grown up pretty much your whole life as the inferior team to what was Fergie's United and them finally surpassing our league titles, and we never got to witness a league title until recently. So to be in a position where you can win at Old Trafford 5-0 and then you can win at home 4-0 and almost take it for granted because there's bigger things to go for and bigger fish to fry. I mean, I think you just got to, as a Liverpool supporter, it's hard, especially for me to do because I'm so into the team and into football in general, but to just step back and be able to say, it never used to be like this. This is nice to see as a Liverpool supporter of our age because we experienced it in recent years, but not to this extent. 9-0 over the two games in the league is just shows obviously the level that Liverpool are at, but also the level that United are at. They are beyond. I don't even want to make too much fun of United as a Liverpool supporter because football has a funny way of evening things out. It may not be this season, it may not even be next season, but it will even out eventually. So I'm trying to put some credit in the karma bank and not go too hard on it. But I mean, you almost feel sorry for United. I mean, you can't because you can't watch players who are making that much money put in such an abject effort when they still have aspirations of top four, or should. They don't, for some reason. And they should have, if nothing else, ambitions of stopping Liverpool from going for the title, their fiercest rival in the domestic game. And to see that effort that they put out, particularly in the first half, I mean, start of the second half, Liverpool looked like they might do the Liverpool thing and concede the next goal once they're 2-0 up. It really did feel that way for a little bit because Liverpool just loved doing that. But that first half, Liverpool reminded me, all the stories about how orcas or killer whales, they play with their food. Liverpool were playing with their food against United. I mean, I thought there were moments where they could have ratcheted it up even more, but they honestly just picked their moments. The goals, I mean, how a back five can look that fragile and disorganized at the start of a game where you have to imagine that they set out to be solid, to play at Anfield in the Fortress, and to just be so open in that moment is terrible. And then the second goal was Liverpool just going through the gears. I think if they wanted to, they could have reached that level a bit more consistently in the first half, but they saw what United were putting out and they saw it wouldn't take that kind of effort. And so very happy, very nice to to win this one 4-0. I mean, obviously, as we said in the last pod, as a supporter, you have nerves going into a game like this, of course. But, I mean, the football objective side came true in this one, and you could just see the levels between the two teams. Must have been a terrible experience for United supporters in a season of terrible experiences, and really just another notch in Liverpool's belt for this and maybe the last 3 or 4 seasons.
You know, you sort of touched on it at the start where you said, you know, is it more telling of where Liverpool are, or is it more telling of where United are? Because I don't watch a lot of Liverpool games because, well, I'm not a supporter, and I only really watch their big fixtures. I'm watching Arsenal games week in, week out, and obviously with the fixtures, sometimes they're playing at the same time, so I'll obviously pick Arsenal over Liverpool. But this game, I've watched them over the last couple of weeks more so because they've had some big fixtures. But this game was, I think your analogy with the Orcas is perfectly sums it up. They, in the first half, they just seemed like they were playing with their food, and I'm going to pick apart the mistakes a lot more. And I know that, I think it was either Roy Keane or Souness or someone, they criticised Rangnick for playing 5 at the back when they've never played 5 at the back. But I'm pretty sure they played 5 at the back in a couple of games, and one of them was the Tottenham game a couple of weeks ago where they won 3-2. Granted, they had Ronaldo there to score the hat-trick, but they played with 5 at the back. They know how to play with 5 at the back, so that's not an excuse. But for that first goal, what the hell is Harry Maguire doing? He goes and pushes up on Mane. Once he receives the ball, he backs off, lets Mane turn in the centre of the field and find that through ball between the space that Maguire left to put Salah through on goal to set up that first one. Like, you either don't go at all and keep your shape as 5, or you press him and make sure that he passes back to Van Dijk or I think it was Matip that was playing. You don't let him turn in the middle of the field. Like, what the hell are you doing? Like, even I know that, and I haven't even played professional football. I've only played at like the amateur / semi-pro level. Like, that is the worst mistake one of the worst mistakes that you can make as a defender. And I was just like, well, it's either him just not being in form or having that lapse of judgment because he's had a really poor season, but he's to blame for that first goal, in my opinion. The second goal was an absolute masterclass. Like, there was about a sequence of 10-15 passes, and like, you know, in that sequence there was about 5 or 6 one-touch passes where they just absolutely broke through that midfield line and the defensive line, and it was a really nice goal to watch. That as a neutral, you're just sitting there, you're like, wow, that is beautiful. The third goal from memory, I can't exactly remember the sequence of play, but the fourth goal, all I can say is how to kill a young player's career in their debut match. As the captain of your football club, you play a 30-yard pass to him that's going to bounce awkwardly, and not only is it a pass, it's not even a pass to him, it was a pass that was like 10-15 meters away from him, so he has to run onto it. So the only way that he can control it is either infield or to his back to goal, back to his attacking goal. So he's facing his own goal. He obviously chooses to control it infield, but it was one of those passes where damned if you do, damned if you don't, where like if you don't control it, you're going to be criticized for not making the effort to make that run to try and keep the ball in play. And if you control it, you need to be on like a, in my opinion, the best first touch is probably Bergkamp or Ronaldinho. You need to have that kind of first touch to make sure that it isn't won back straight away by the opposition. And Maguire just absolutely killed him. So the captain killed a young player's debut pretty much, like with that kind of pass. And United were punished for it. And you also mentioned like that first half, that was a complete domination. And in the start of the second half, I think Liverpool did take their foot off the gas a little, and it was probably down to United slightly changing their formation and coming out maybe like 5 or 10% hungrier. But like once United had their first sniff at your goal, and I think it was around the 50. I think their first shot on goal was around the 58th minute, if I'm not mistaken. That's when you guys sort of stepped it up and started putting your foot on the gas, and instead of being in first gear, you probably propped it up back to third gear probably. But yeah, that was, from a United perspective, that was absolutely horrifying. From a Liverpool perspective, it's like, considering all the stick that you guys have gotten over the last 30 years from especially from Ferguson and United supporters, justice to an extent, or karma, whichever way you want to look at it. But yeah, as a neutral, and as a sort of rival, being like Arsenal having their rivalry in the late 90s, early 2000s, as a sort of rival to United, I'm happy to see them lose, to be honest. I don't know what your take on those individual mistakes were, but yeah, I want to hand it back to you.
Yeah, I want to try and go into them, so I'm just trying to remember them all while you're speaking there. So with the first one, there were two really interesting things that you brought up. One is, I think, a tactical breakdown in this moment and a personnel breakdown, where Dalot goes high to press the ball, leaves acres of space there, and the personnel mistake is that Harry Maguire is your left centre-back. So now when Dalot does go and press into those areas, Harry Maguire is the one asked to be the one defending the space to the side. Now, the other interesting thing you said was he followed him halfway in and then left him, which of course is a cardinal sin, but I think that speaks to his fragility at the moment. I mean, he doesn't know whether he's coming or going. I think he goes in because he thinks, back five, I should go in and press on Mane. And by the way, Mane's brilliant to pick out that Harry Maguire is playing in that position and go and play against him and ask him to come out. But then he goes to do that as like, oh, no, wait, Dalot's high up the park. I've got to cover his space. And he just gets caught absolutely nowhere. And also, this is a big problem I have with De Gea, and I've mentioned it a fair few times. I don't know if I have on the pod, but any other goalkeeper, Alisson or Edison or any other goalkeeper who's willing to come off their line, that ball is going to get cleared. I don't think Mo Salah reaches that ball. That is pretty much in the corner of his penalty box. The goalkeeper, I think, should see that and should come out and should clear that. But De Gea's not that goalkeeper. De Gea stays on his line. And sometimes, and it'll be interesting to see now with Ten Hag coming in, sometimes when teams want to play higher, it's very hard to play high when your goalkeeper wants to stay on his line, because now there's an awful lot of space for the opposition to play the ball into. So if Ten Hag indeed does want to play higher, I think that's something he's going to have to look at, because De Gea is not that type of goalkeeper. The type of goalkeeper De Gea is, and who De Gea would be perfect to go back to actually, is Atletico, because there he can just goalkeep. He's not asked to play with his feet too much. He's not asked to come off his line too much. I think he'd be a perfect replacement for a really out of form Jan Oblak if United were to look at getting in a different goalkeeper. But I wanted to point that out because that's a maybe not a criticism I've had of De Gea, because that's just his style and he's a good goalkeeper at staying on his line. But it's something that if you want to play a high line, it's just not going to work for me. The second goal, I think the whole theme is again Sadio Mane, who was probably man of the match in this game. It was unbelievable. That pass around the corner. The commentators wanted to invoke Luka Modric's name in, but I think he refrained from doing it for that pass. He waited for another Thiago. Well, Thiago's another one who had a great shout for man of the match as well, the way he bossed it. So, some of his line-splitting passes through the midfield, the ones where he shapes to just cross-field switch it, then he reverses it back into a gap in the midfield are just tremendous. He was a joy to watch. But again, that's United not laying a glove on him. So the second ball, Sadio Mane, probably co-man of the match. What a ball. Salah's touch is great, and then he finishes it all in one motion. The third goal actually was interesting because United were on top, as you say, for the first 15, 20 minutes of the second half. But another mistake, another square ball into Elanga. Robbo picks it up and then drives forward. And the Mane finish at the end of that move was just fantastic. The way he swept it into that far corner with the ball bouncing onto his left foot. I mean, really, really classy finish there from probably the player that Liverpool are probably going to use in that false nine slot for the big games now. I think he's going to settle on some variation of this. I mean, the only thing I worry about is Jota, because I don't think he's as effective when he plays out wide. I think he's much better through the middle. But Mane, the way he's playing through the middle at the moment, probably looks like the guy you might trust in these bigger games. So that's a little side note. And then the fourth pass, when you're going through describing this guy, it's one of my biggest pet peeves is a ball from goalkeeper or centre back into midfield, into a midfield player who has their back to goal. But in this as well, it can be an advantage if you have a player like a Frankie de Jong who is brilliant at picking up the ball in those tight spaces, can collapse a whole defense because someone wants to go in and press on him. But because you can trust him enough in possession there, he's someone who can play out of that and sort of when he was on form at Ajax, he collapsed the defense in much the same way Messi was collapsing defenses at the time. He was brilliant at it, especially when he played in that holding midfield role. And that might be an aside I want to get to a little bit later. But yeah, that's a big pet peeve of mine. I hate seeing that to players who, like you say, the inexperience, you can't be knocking that ball in. It's just, there's a funny, I don't know if you've seen the video going around of in the Norwich game, De Gea receiving a back pass and he has Harry Maguire wide open on the right and he instead chooses to just knock it out of play on the left-hand side. So, I mean, that's what I think I think that would have been a better move for Harry Maguire to do than try and knock it into the young lads, into the midfield of the young lad where he's just going to get swarmed by, yet again, to use the analogy, those killer whales of Liverpool just hunting. And so that's my breakdown of all those mistakes you said. I think it's agreed. It's just, that's how I saw them. And I know a lot of your mistakes involve Harry Maguire, and obviously rightly so. And I'm sure you probably saw the interview he did before the game, defending his position in the starting 11. My question to you is, would you want your players and your captain coming out and doing interviews when the club's in this time? Do you want them to be showing their face, or do you want them to just go away and keep a low profile and, I don't know, hopefully keep working on their game? I don't know how you see it in terms of that.
Well, I think the captain should be that line of communication between the fans / media and the club, alongside the coach, because the old time saying is that the captain is essentially the coach on the field, like he's the coach's voice. So I don't mind so much the captain coming out and doing interviews. If it was other players, then yeah, I'd probably be a little bit more against it, especially when they aren't doing well at all as a team, as a club. Now, you can make your arguments as to whether Maguire should be the captain of United at all as well, because I've seen a lot of people say that he's the worst captain United's ever had, and they probably have an argument there. But yeah, I think for the captain to come out and have interviews, that's fine for me, to be honest.
Yeah, that's fair, but I mean, we've heard it from United all season, so I don't know. Like, what am I going to get out of my captain coming and doing an interview except for ridicule because now they've taken a soundbite, and obviously this guy's playing like absolute and utter shite. So it's easy to go at someone who's playing like that. I mean, and just have any soundbite from an interview, and then it's like, well, you can see why the managers must know something to put me in the starting 11 or some words to those effect, and then him just lay an absolute egg in this game against your fiercest domestic rivals. I mean, I don't know. I think it's gotten to the point where you're torn because, like, oh, are they hiding from it? They just don't want to be seen. But at the same time, it's like, well, shut up. I've heard everything you want to say. Until I see something on the pitch, what the hell's the point of you talking? Just shut up for real. But yeah, I just thought that was interesting because I know you wanted to go. It seems like you've come in with and he's given you enough ammunition to do it, but the anti-Maguire agenda, I'm not lost on him. But my God, they need United as a whole need this season to end. And speaking of ending, I guess that means that would be a good place to transition into obviously the big news. Erik Ten Hag coming in over the summer. What's your reactions to that news?
Well, I think I've said it before. I'm not sure if I've said it on the podcast before, but if Arsenal were next season to not get top four, this season I already said that my expectation was not top four, and that for me they're exceeding expectations. I would have liked for Ten Hag to come in and replace Arteta, because who was it? I'm not sure if it was you or Matthias that was saying that Arsenal could Arteta could sort of be like that transitional coach that sort of lays the foundations for that next coach to come in and then finish off the project and like sort of complete it. I'm not sure if you or Matthias compared that to sort of like a Brendan Rodgers sort of at Liverpool and then Klopp taking over, or if it was someone else. I can't remember off the top of my head. Lampard and Tuchel. So Lampard sort of got everything together, got the players together, but he just couldn't bring them playing as a team, or at least couldn't get the performances together. But then when Tuchel came in, they won the Champions League 5-6 months later. So I think that could have been sort of that sort of transitional, like Arteta could have been that transitional coach. But now that I've seen over the course of this season, I think Arteta's starting to prove that he's the real deal, but we'll get into that a little bit later on. But yeah, like I would have loved Ten Hag to come in at Arsenal if things failed with Arteta, because I rate what he's done at Ajax. Yes, like if you want to criticize individual matches, you can go back to that semi-final against Tottenham, and then obviously you can go back to this round of 16 against Benfica, but they're individual games. Like you need to rate him on the body of work. Now, the real question is, how rotten is United's core as a club, and how much power is Ten Hag going to get in order to fix everything? And not only that, how much help is he going to get as well? Like, are they going to allow him to bring in a lot of his own people to handle different aspects of the team and the club and everything to change, get that culture changed once again back to its winning ways? He has a massive, massive task on his hands, and I wish I could say good luck to him, but that means that there's another rival for top four and for the title in a couple of years. But like considering that I do like how he has Ajax playing, I guess good luck if he can get United playing to a similar level, because that means that for a neutral, they'll be entertaining to watch again. Because right now, I think I'd rather watch Everton than United.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because I was messaging one of our friends who's a Man United supporter today, and he was saying he just wanted to see him playing good football again. So yeah, you want him to be watchable, don't you? If you're a United fan, really at the moment. Interesting point you brought up about Ten Hag and Arsenal. I thought, look from the outside looking in, there's no doubt. I think if that job became available, if the Arsenal job did become available at this time, that would have been a much better move for him than going to United. Because I can't speak to how rotten it is at the core or how not rotten it is, whatever, because I don't know what's going on within those inner circles, obviously. But and I don't know if Ten Hag has an inkling, knows what's going on, knows the people involved in the core of United. I don't know. But what he can judge on is the information that's in front of you. And the information is your playing squad, your wage bill, and the body of work and the way they've played this season. And that's what you can see, and the ages of your playing squad and all the information and the attributes of your playing squad. And for that reason, I don't understand it. I don't understand it from two sides, actually. I don't understand it from the United perspective, and I don't understand it from Ten Hag's perspective. I don't know why he's going to that club at the moment with that playing squad, that wage bill. I know a few players come off their wages or come off their contracts. Like they finally get rid of Juan Mata. I think Cavani comes off. Lingard comes off. And by the way, Lingard coming off his contract this off-season, and I don't know the ins and outs, but it seems like a massive bit of malpractice, because in the summer after he had his loan stint at West Ham, I think they could have got about 20, 25 million for him, because he looked really good at West Ham. And to leave him at the club and let his value depreciate like that without playing him really all that often, and just let him go on a free at the end of the season. I mean, that just shows you they don't really care. Like they spend a lot of money on just nothing. I mean, it's madness that, but from Ten Hag's perspective, I mean,
yeah, I think
he's never been in this position.
Hey, I think I just want to pop this in. I think Newcastle also wanted him for 10 or 12 million, but I think United then wanted an extra 5 million or 6 million if Newcastle stayed up in the Premier League, and that was the sticking point. But Newcastle wanted him now in January, so they could have got money for him in January with 6 months left.
Yeah, and that's in January after he's probably depreciated a few mil just being there for the half season already. So, but yeah, that's a good little nugget to go with that. But from Ten Hag, he's never been in this position. I mean, Ajax was a team of pretty much all youngsters that he got. Well, he keeps getting to good positions in Europe to playing good football. But no one in those teams is going to challenge him. Whereas he's going to walk into United, all those players are more established than him. All those key players. I know Pogba is the obviously notable one. I didn't mention, but he's going to be probably leaving in the summer. We don't know, but 99% it looks like that's the case. Especially the way he limped off, and that was pathetic. My God, I don't want to cast this accusation, but I mean, it has to be said: was he really injured? Because that was weak. He saw it after 10, 15 minutes. They were getting slaughtered, and it just looked like he didn't want to be there. Ranić didn't want to be there, absolutely. But yeah, I just thought that was a little side note. But so he's walking into a team with those kinds of players who he needs to try and command respect from straight away. And then he's also walking into a team that have no style of play, no discernible patterns that when you watch them, it's like, yep, that's Manchester United. They just play a nothing brand of football, and they have for years now. Even back to the Mourinho days, even back to the Van Gaal days. They've just been poor for a long time. I mean, under those managers, they were good managers, so they got good results for them. But you see it as well, and Solskjaer was getting to a point. Maybe Solskjaer is the one who got closest to United playing some kind of way last season, in the way that they were counter-attacking on good sides, and they finished second in the league, but admittedly the league was weak. But when you look back at it, he might be the guy who came closest to having a sort of a playing style identity for this team. So for Ten Hag to come in a team that just is full of older, experienced players who have been there, have done that, who will challenge him straight away, who will see what he knows, and for him to try and get them to play this up-tempo, high-possession style that he has at Ajax, it just doesn't make sense for me, unless he's really good at adapting and he can come in with something completely different. The other side of the coin, though, of course, is, and I want to get your perspective on it. Do you think in hiring Ten Hag they have started the rebuild, or are they going to try and get results with what they have still?
I think they plan to start the rebuild this summer because you've touched on it. I think there are quite a lot of players that are out of contract. So you mentioned Juan Mata. I think Paul Pogba is actually out of contract. This
I
summer.
said Paul as well.
Yeah. Phil Jones as well is out of contract. Lingard.
No, I think he has another year. I think he's
Does he?
2023.
Okay.
I think he's 2023. That's what I was reading today.
Huh.
On
Okay.
transfer market.
But I do know that there's quite a bit of players that are out of contract, so they will pretty much be free to go. It all depends on how much they give Ten Hag, like how much, not finances, but how much power and how much say he gets over the club. Are they just going to go out and find players that are big names? Like, for instance, this summer, they got Varane, who has shown that he has injury problems, like prior to coming to United. They got Ronaldo, who's a 36-year-old. I think he turned 37 this year, didn't he? And they got Sancho, which is one for the future. So that was probably their only good deal of business, especially considering that they could have, if they got him last year, they could have paid like 40 or 50 mil more for him. So that's the only good deal of business that they did. Yeah, granted, he hasn't performed to the level that he has shown at Dortmund, but I think that's more telling of the team rather than him as an individual. So it all depends on how much say Ten Hag has over transfers. If they're just going to throw names and players at him and say deal with it, I think he's doomed from the beginning. Like, that's because he's not going to get the players that he wants, and it's not going to be able to fit the system that he wants to implement, because he's going to want to implement his own system. And it's going to be most likely a similar style of play to Ajax, because that's what he's familiar with. And I guess that's what most clubs are going with. So they're either going for this sort of that sort of German pressing style system that, you know, Klopp has sort of made famous, or they're going for that sort of possession-based tiki-taka style that Guardiola has brought back to the front. That's where football is heading. So it's like a clash of those two styles. That sort of defensive style that Atletico employ, that's no club really wants that at their club unless you're fighting relegation. But every team or every club seems to be going in that direction. So it, like I said, it just depends whether United are going to support him and give him what he wants, or whether he's just doomed to fail. That's how I see it going into it.
A few things, and I might get into a little bit of a rant here. Um, Football goes where with the styles that wins. I feel whatever's winning at the time, it goes with. I mean, the '60s and '70s, we had Inter winning European Cups, so we had Catenaccio prevalent, and then we go through cycles of it. Then we have possession, then we have pressing, and we just go through cycles. We have total football with Ajax, such a high pressing. Teams try to replicate it. We have Barcelona and with under Guardiola, teams try to replicate it. I hate that. You play to your players' characteristics, and I can't stand seeing these alleged top level managers. And like, there are exceptions, of course, because you see it so often. But for me, my philosophy is as a manager, you have principles, no doubt, but you adapt your playing style and your systems and your formations and your patterns to the players that you have to put them in the best position to succeed. So it's not. I don't like when managers go into a club, they look at the playing group and they say, these guys cannot play my style. And then they feel like they need to rehaul the whole playing group. Let's not forget at the start of this season, United were mentioned in a group of four to challenge for the title. And it was Chelsea, it was Liverpool, it was City, and United were there. Gary Neville said it. This is a clip that's resurfaced over Instagram or whatever. He said that the Premier League might have four of the best teams in the world, and United were in there. So you looked at the squad and you thought, that team, if things click, they should challenge for the title. Things haven't clicked. It's very clear. But that doesn't mean these players are bad players. You know, I was looking through the contract information. Do you know how old Rafael Varane is?
I think he's 30.
I had 28 when I looked.
Oh, really?
Nuts.
That's surprising.
Exactly. So it's not like he's over the hill. Obviously, Bruno Fernandes is not over the hill. I mean, it looks like they won't get Paul Pogba back on side, but he's not over the hill. Ronaldo still scored 15 goals this season. So I just look at it and I think it's got to be on Ten Hag to go in and try and get results and try and get top four straight away with the playing squad that he basically has, while also slowly getting your Phil Joneses, your Nemanja Matic's, your Martials, who's only on loan at Sevilla. You got to slowly get them off the books, obviously, if you don't want them, because United have been terrible at overpaying. So the problem for me with him going there is now if he does want to rebuild, he's got to wait a few windows to sell players to bring other players in. Because, I mean, if you're bringing players in, but you've still got the old players around, what kind of culture are you building around the club, really? Are you getting your group together as just a group to, to look to push on and move forward from that point? Because, like, those old players who aren't playing, who are still at the club, I don't think all of them are just going to put up and shut up. I mean, some of them might cause trouble. They'll want to be playing. So, what kind of environment are you bringing your new signings into if you haven't got rid of the dead wood already? So, if he has to get rid of dead wood, that's at least three transfer windows, if not more. So, he's almost a sitting duck for the next nearly 2 seasons of just trying to rebuild, trying to rebuild. I think they should. I think United should go the other way and should look at the fact that they do have some really good players there. If they need to play, if they can't play this sort of open game that they've been trying to play at various points with Solskjaer as a 4-2-4 and Ranić with his 4-2-4, why can't we just play a 5-3-2? I mean, a 5-3-2 can be proactive. You can press in a 5-3-2. You can keep territory in a 5-3-2, and you can give more protection to players like Harry Maguire who are struggling. You can give more protection to your central midfielders in there. You can give, and then you can put someone quicker like a Rashford next to a Ronaldo. Why don't we just make that our style until we get good enough to play with four at the back? Because five at the back gives you so much more solidity. I think there's signings out there for him as well. I think there's players out there. I look at Wan-Bissaka, who cost them 50 mil. I think he could play as a right-sided centre-back because he is terrible going forward. So stop him from going forward. But when in a 1v1 defensive position, when he's actually confident, which is obviously not now, when he's confident, he's nearly unbeatable in a 1v1. And then maybe you could even play a Rashford at right wing back and force him to do his defensive work. Because again, Rashford is not a good player in front of goal, and I don't think he's clinical and effective. But what he has is pace. So if you could get him arriving from deeper positions, and then I think, and I brought this up before, but this is an interesting one to look out for because Barcelona have just got Frank Kessie in on a free. He's coming in the summer. And they also have another young central midfielder who I've already mentioned on the pod in Frankie de Jong. And obviously, Frankie de Jong and Erik Ten Hag have worked together before. So I'll be fascinated to see that one. If they get him in, I think United will be a lot better next season. Get him in and then sort out what to do with the defense, which I've got ideas on, as I've already talked about. But if they could get him in, I think he gives them that. Well, we just talked about it with the mistake that they made for the fourth goal. But he gives them someone who can play through and link up that play from midfield. I don't know if you want to throw out any other hope for United fans in terms of signings as well, because there's a few I think are possible this season if you go with the win now approach, because you're going to have to spend money on them.
I think if you look at that team, they have, like, at the start of the season, I was throwing them in to challenge the title, especially with the signings that they made. Obviously, it's all fallen apart for them, and they've pretty much checked out now with, like, 6 or 7 games left to go. It looks like they've already gone on holiday and they're not playing for anything. In terms of signings, look, they'll have Van der Beek coming back. So that could potentially be like a fresh signing, especially under Ten Hag, because they've worked together.
Average. He's just not very good. So I don't get this obsession with Van der Beek. He's just not very good. What are we looking at when we watch him?
Look, maybe he's not suited for the Premier League, but like he was part of that midfield. Midfield three.
Yeah, I know. So we'll see. Maybe Ten Hag could get a tune out of him. I get your point, but ever since, even at Ajax, I didn't think he was very good. But ever since he left, he has been worse than not very good.
Yeah, 100%. But like, look, that's a potential one that they could potentially get something out of. So maybe that will be like a fresh player for them. In terms of new signings, look, I haven't really looked at anyone that can fit United because I don't really give a damn about United, to be honest. Especially after the 20 or so years of domination that they've had over English football. Their cycle for now has come to an end, and football always goes in cycles. And it probably won't be another 5 or 10 years before they win a Premier League. I'd say closer to 10 years before they win a Premier League, because it's going to take Ten Hag at least 3 to 4 transfer windows to get the team that he wants playing. And the only hope that I guess I see for them winning it sooner is if Klopp and Guardiola both leave around the same time and pretty much relinquish their dominance on English football. Like, Liverpool and City will still be the teams that are challenging, but without those two at the head, they won't be as dominant as what they have been. But because the club infrastructure is so good at both of them, they'll still be around there challenging for the title.
And before we get off the United topic, I don't know if you have anything else you wanted to bring up, but before we get off it, I want to somewhat, it's not a really detailed play because I'm just thinking of it on the fly, but I want to somewhat bring up a blueprint for them to be challenging for titles in 3 years rather than 10 years. Because let's not forget, this is Manchester United. They have the financial power to pay a player over £500,000 a week. So money isn't really an object for this club. It's a huge club. And I think as a huge club, it's hard for me to see them going with a rebuild approach. I think they have to continue with a win now approach. It has to be, we have to get into top four and attract the best players every season. It has to be that. So I think the manager has to come in and instill that. We're not here waiting around 2, 3 seasons rebuilding while everyone else gets better. We've got to win now. We've got to get into the top four now, because every season that passes that we're not in the top four, the talent goes to the clubs that are in the top four. The talent doesn't want to play football. No, that's not Champions League football. We need to get top four. So I think the blueprint is he needs to get a tune out of these players who at the start of the season we thought were going to be challenging for the title. And that's not to say they still can't do it. This season has left them with a deep scar, but how does the manager react coming into that group? Does he galvanize them? Does he bring them together? And does he push them forward to the heights that they should have maybe reached this season? And I'm not saying win a title, but maybe be in the mix in February and March and finish top four rather comfortably, which I still think this squad is capable of doing. But the manager has to come in and do that. And my concerns with Ten Hag are, without seeing it, obviously he could prove me completely wrong, is that his mentality will be come in and I need to start afresh. And my problem with that, with a club of United size, it's going to take a couple of years to undo the mistakes that have already been made. And then by that time, we don't know how much better the clubs at the top have gotten. It might still be Liverpool and City. And if it's still Liverpool and City at the top at that time, I have no doubt they will probably be in the next stage. So they'll be looking at rejuvenizing the teams. But the problem is they'll be a lot further ahead of in terms of rejuvenizing their teams than United, because they'll be doing it from a position where they're in the top four and they're attracting the best players. And you don't know if Tottenham will be up there 2 or 3 seasons. So if you have to wait this time, you don't know how much better the rest around you will get. And then it could be a long old wait until you're even in the top four again. So I really think the mentality has to be win now.
I think they've gone for that mentality for the last 7 or 8 seasons since Fergie left, and from what I've been hearing, the club's debt is just racketing up. So I'm not sure that they can keep on affording that kind of mentality. I think they need to.
Okay, before you go on, and here's the other thing, or the thing I want to say on that is, why would Ten Hag take that job then? If he can't go to somewhere where he is going to win, I think he could have waited another season, another job would have opened up, or another half season. So I don't understand the mentality from him as well to go there.
Well, money talks, right? Has it been reported how much apparently they might be paying him as well? He might be getting
I don't know, but
2-3 times more than what he's getting at Ajax.
And if that's the case, and you've gone for money, your obligation is to win football games. I think that's what your obligation should be. I don't know. That's just the way I see it.
All in all, though, I think that he has a massive job on his hands, and it's going to be interesting to see how their transfer window goes this summer, because as you mentioned, they have the financial capability to buy any player that they want. The only problem is if they don't make top four, they don't guarantee Champions League. And also, at the moment, United is only going based off their brand name. So how can they still attract those top players? Because no top player, I think at the moment, if you were to ask a top player, do you want to play at City or do you want to play at United? They're going to say they want to play at City, even if they're getting 50 or 100 grand less per week, because United will need to fork out 20, 30, 40, 50% more in wages just to attract that top talent, because it's a rotten club at the moment and they're not going to be winning anything as a player if they go there. So that's my final take on it, and it's going to be interesting to see how that all goes. And I think you touched on it before. I think we've spent enough time on United. Get that filthy name out of my mouth. But we're probably going to touch on them later on because there's another big fixture coming up. But for now, I need to clean my mouth out with some nice, refreshing, juicy Arsenal. Ooh. What a game. What a result.
Control yourself, man. Control yourself. It's a PG pod, come on.
Now, look, I'm not going to get ahead of myself because I think this result is sort of telling of the season that we've had, and I think that's down to the lack of experience that we have in the squad and the fact that we are in that rebuilding process where we can lose 3 games in a row against middle of the table teams and then get a result like that and turn it around at Stamford Bridge against, albeit a slightly weakened Chelsea. Only their defence was really the weak point, and it was only their centre-back pairings that were the weak point. But the rest of their squad was actually pretty much what you'd expect their starting 11 to be. So they were playing with maybe a 90% full-strength squad. And look, there's a little bit of regret there as well, because had we have picked up points at least against Brighton and Southampton, we would actually be sitting 3rd right now. This result would have taken us ahead of Chelsea, I believe, and it pretty much would have
wins in those games.
It pretty much would have locked top 4 for us. I know that there's still, mathematically it's not locked, but it pretty much would have locked it, because we would be, I think, 6 or 9 points ahead of Tottenham. Another team would actually be below us as well. But it's, as much as I want to be happy about the result, I'm also a little bit concerned about the result, because hopefully it doesn't leak in a little bit of complacency going into this weekend, because it could be something similar to the Southampton result, where Southampton got absolutely thumped by Chelsea, and then Southampton went, okay, let's just lock up the back and try playing on the counter, make sure we don't concede goals. And I know I wasn't going to say their name again for at least until we get into that, but I want to touch on it quickly. United might do the same thing. They just shipped 4 goals against Liverpool. They might say, all right, let's keep it tight at the back and just play on the counter. Just give them, 60, 70% of possession. Let's try not to play. So going back to the Chelsea result, I think it was, the first half was for a neutral, it was very entertaining. It was very back and forth. It was a little bit of that sort of like, we just scored, we just concede, we just scored, we just concede, and like for an Arsenal fan, it's like just that feeling like, again, like we can't keep that lead, and especially considering I think the first 2 goals they came against us, they came from mistakes. I guess the first goal for us came from a mistake as well. The second Arsenal goal was beautiful. It came from a little bit of mayhem at the back, with like Xhaka having to dribble past 2-3 players and even getting a nutmeg, I think, on Werner or Lukaku. And then us playing on the counter and getting that goal. But the second half it showed our capability to be able to play defensively and keep things tight at the back as well, especially with a slightly makeshift back 4, since Ben White was playing right back and Rob Holding slotted in as centre back, and that actually then let us build from the back to then get the 2 goals that we gotten. So overall, I'm happy with the results, and but it is a little bit upsetting considering we didn't get the results leading into the game to put us in a better position. And I just hope that it will build from there. So I'm not sure what you took from the game as a neutral. I think I had more to say against the Liverpool United game as a neutral than I do against this one, probably because the emotions are more prevalent than in the United Liverpool game. But yeah, I want to get your thoughts on it.
Well, I'll tell you one thing to start with. I must be some kind of idiot to have trusted Chelsea for this long after they've started having their blip in the middle of the season, because that looked like a team that was ready to go on holiday. And by the time we play them in the FA Cup final, we being Liverpool, obviously, that's not going to be a team that I look at as the team that was close to being at the City Liverpool level for so long. That's going to be a team that's scrapping to finish in the top four, because all of a sudden they're somewhat embroiled in a race to finish in the top four. I fully trust that they have enough quality to see out that job, but for a team that for large parts of the season I was saying was the third best team in Europe, for them to have sort of capitulated in this way in recent weeks, with the only bright spot being that Southampton and then the Bernabeu performance. I mean, that was a shadow team out there. And N'Golo Conte's not in great form. I thought he played all right, but that wasn't the normal N'Golo Conte you see. Thiago Silva's not commanding at the back anymore. Obviously, they were missing Rudiger. But as much as the players' performances, I thought the players' performances just showed a team that felt like it had nothing to play for, and they better rethink that very quickly, because if they don't, they're gonna have a few edgy games at the end of the season just to finish in that top four. I thought the game was a really fun game between two really flawed teams for me. I mean, Chelsea, I've just gone into the mentality, but Arsenal, every time Chelsea put any somewhat attack together, I thought they looked really vulnerable. I'm not blaming that on Arteta, because I thought Arteta did the right thing in this game, actually changing formation to go to that 3-4-3. Gave more support to El Neni and Xhaka in the midfield by playing Odegaard and Smith Rowe as sort of two number 10s who could also really thicken up that midfield as well when they didn't have the ball. It was interesting to see how the dynamic of how Arsenal played with Nketiah up front as opposed to Lacazette. They were pressing a lot further up the park. It's about time that I saw Nketiah play a decent game, because going into this game, I had seen glimpses of him and I thought he was well below average. And I think I read somewhere maybe a season ago or something that he didn't want to sign a new contract because he thought he was worth more. So it was about time to see a performance where, all right, maybe I can see some sort of justification where you got this notion from that you deserve more than what Arsenal are willing to give you, because you've been awful to this point. But he played well, and that was the most interesting thing I thought about him playing, was just how much further up the pitch they were pressing. But that harder defence. Side note, have we seen a greater comeback in sports this year? Maybe Tiger going to Augusta and playing 4 rounds. But have we seen a greater comeback than Rob Holding's hairline? My goodness, that thing is thick. He's got that hair looking lush. Where'd that come from? I thought that was just something funny to point out. But look, I wouldn't get... I think you're right to have reservations about Arsenal, because I thought that obviously this was Chelsea playing with Lukaku up front. Tuchel just hasn't found a way to play with him up front. Another thing is interesting. Remember when I think this was the second game of this season, and remember when Arsenal looked absolutely terrible? I think they were losing to all those top sides at the start. And remember when Lukaku scored at the Emirates, and we just thought, wow, I mean, he looks like he can take Chelsea to the next level. It's just funny how in football, wow, seasons are long. And now look at Lukaku when he plays in a Chelsea team. That Chelsea team just doesn't look very good. So I think you're right to have the reservations just because of the criticisms I've leveled at Chelsea just there. And I think Arsenal looked really incisive, and I thought Arteta did the right thing in changing his formation, but I still wasn't convinced by Arsenal either. I think Ramsdale's looked the shakiest he's looked. His early season form seems to have disappeared somewhat, and he looks closer to the Ramsdale we saw at Bournemouth and Sheffield United rather than the early season Arsenal Ramsdale. And Chelsea were just limp in this game, and you guys were incisive, which was good to see, but you were shaky at the back. So a really fun game, but two flawed teams is what I took away from it.
Yeah, and I think going into this game, I said that it will benefit Arsenal not having to play against a low block, and we saw what happens when we don't have to deal with a low block because we don't have the attacking players like a Liverpool and a Man City to break down those low blocks like what we had to face against Brighton and especially Southampton. And even City and Liverpool struggle at times against playing the low blocks. So let alone Arsenal, who don't have those quality of players just yet. But I think like you said, Arteta got pretty much everything spot on with all the personnel changes. He got a tune out of pretty much everybody as well. Like, I can't really fault any player. Ramsdale, yeah, you mentioned that he's had his dip of form, but I think he had an injury a couple of weeks ago, and maybe he still isn't 100%. Also, when the team is slightly struggling, then you're gonna get players that do struggle as well. So who knows if there's maybe a sort of an underlying issue there where maybe he isn't 100% recovered. Maybe he's like 90 or 95% recovered. He's still having those little niggles. I think it was like a hamstring injury or something. But overall, it was definitely a performance that you could be proud of as an Arsenal fan, but at the same time concerned about, because we're not necessarily getting those week in, week out, but you can definitely see that there is something there that with a couple more players it can be built upon, and there is something special that's being created by Arteta at the club. But again, it just depends whether the right signings come in, and we're going to have, I think, Lacazette's coming to the end of his contract. I think Nketiah's at the end of his contract at the end of this season. So we're essentially going to have a new front line next year as well, especially if those two don't sign extensions. But I'd probably be willing to give Nketiah an extension, maybe 2 years, potentially even 3, because he has shown over the last couple of games he has shown a little bit of form, and he's still young. I think he's only like 22 or 23, whereas Laka's already like 30 or 31, might even be older. So it's going to be interesting going into next season how strongly we can finish this season, and I think it's good now to sort of transition into the games coming in this weekend, and that'll.
Just before you do,
yeah.
I just one little thing I wanted to add on the back of your point. I'm not yet convinced Arteta's building something special. I wouldn't go that far. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I am saying that if this season, and this was a great result, but let's not forget what it came on the back of. came on the back of a string of losses. Also, the way Chelsea played, and I know this is unfair to change the goalposts, but I barely count that as a win against a big three team because Chelsea have just been knocked out of the Champions League. I guess they still got the FA Cup, but they're so far away from the top two. I think they definitely took their foot off the gas big time, and you could see that in recent performances in the league. So I know it's unfair to change a goalpost, but I struggle to count that as a one game against a game that they won against a really quality opposition because Chelsea were quite lifeless for me in that game. So I'm not saying he's not the right man to lead them forward, but I am definitely not there to be convinced that he's building something like what Klopp has built at Liverpool, say. I've still got my jury out on Arteta. But I think as long as he challenges for top four this season, he should be given another chance next season. So yeah, that's just my thoughts on what you were saying there.
Yeah, and look, I can see your point. Like Chelsea have definitely been weakened, and I did touch on it at the start. Like this was almost a full strength Chelsea side. Like yes, Lukaku isn't firing on all cylinders. Kante has been a little bit out of form, but if you look at just the players,
definitely.
It was only their centre-back pairing that doesn't start week in, week out. But other than that, all the other players start pretty much every week. And just to touch on your point, like there's been performances where we have looked fantastic. It's just those inconsistencies where, and I mentioned on the last podcast, like if Liverpool or Man City drop a game, it's one game that they drop. They don't go on a 2-3 game losing streak where they drop 9 points or 12 points. They drop 3 points and then they're already stringing together, 5 or 6 or 10 wins in a row. Arsenal have had that. I think if you were to bring up their season results, you're probably going to see a lot of that where they get 2 or 3 losses or 2 or 3 losses and draws, like combination in a row or 4, and then they go on a win streak of like 4 or 5 games. Or I think going into the international break before the Crystal Palace game, they won like 10 out of 11 games. Their only loss was to Liverpool, and I think there might have been 1 draw in there potentially. So they're managing to string together wins, but they're also stringing together losses, which they need to eliminate out of the game. And I think that will come from obviously adding better personnel up front that can actually score goals consistently, because we don't have that player at the moment that can score like a guaranteed even 15 goals. We don't have someone that can guarantee 15 goals in our team, let alone 20 or 30 goals like you do with like a Mo Salah or a Mane, and even Jota's I think chipped in 15 in the league as well. City, they're a completely different animal because they're scoring 10 goals from 6 or 7 different players. So like Sterling's going to chip in 10, Mahrez's going to chip in 10, Gundogan's going to chip in 10, De Bruyne's going to chip in 10, and so on. So they're a slightly different beast. But next season, if the reports are true that they're getting Haaland in, and if Haaland's fit, they're going to have that player that can chip in 30 goals. We don't have that yet. It'll be telling whether we do get that in the summer. But just with that, I can see the foundations. Like I, as an Arsenal fan, can see the foundations that Arteta is starting to build something, because the defense has looked more solid than what it's looked over the last couple of years. The midfield has looked slightly better as well. The problem is that there's not necessarily that backup for Partey. Xhaka's looked a little bit better this season as well. But it's just that forward line that it's not firing on all cylinders week in, week out. It has its 2 or 3 or 4 weeks where it looks like a top 3, top 4 forward line in the Premier League. But then at other times it just looks really, really blunt. So that's the way I see it. Obviously, have your reservations, which is completely fine, and I do too,
Yeah, I
to an
guess.
extent. But I think I'm more positive about it than you are.
Yeah, I guess my only. Yeah, I guess to summarize what I wanted to say, I could see it going just as easily down the Brendan Rodgers, Roberto Martinez route as I could see it ending up in the Klopp route for Arteta. So I'm still undecided. I can see it going either way for him at Arsenal. To be fair, because remember Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool strung together some really good performances, challenged for that title, but that was mainly Suarez. But even the season after, we went on a good run in the middle of the season, kind of like what Arsenal have done now, and we fell away around this point. So be interesting to see what comes for the rest of the season. I know that will probably lead you to have a good little segue for you to lead into what we want to talk to next.
Yeah, well, all I can say is we'll see how the summer goes. That will be the interesting point. Now we'll lead into obviously we're gonna get that United name back in our mouths. So Arsenal versus United, and I sort of touched on this. Where are we going to see a similar sort of result where Southampton get battered the week prior to Arsenal facing them, and then they just shut up shop, and Arsenal struggle to break down that low block? Or are we going to see what we've seen from United all season, which is just an unwillingness to play, no motivation, and just be open to being especially being open to being carved by a team? It's going to be telling to see how Rangnick goes with the approach. I'm hoping they go into this game with a little bit more pride than just shutting up shop, and it leaves gaps for Arsenal to exploit, because Arsenal will be coming into this full of confidence. And if United do go in with that low block, I think we're going to struggle to break them down, and they do have the players to play on the counter against us, and we could get punished by that. But I'm hoping that I see a continuation of results from Arsenal. I'm not sure how you look at this game.
I almost look at it, and if Cristiano Ronaldo is playing, then you guys have a chance of losing. If he's not playing, I can maybe see a draw, but I can't see you guys losing it. And I could only see a draw because I don't fully trust in your form at the moment. That result at Chelsea, while a great boost, hasn't plastered over the cracks. It's maybe papered over them. So we'll see. United are still. I mean, you look on paper, they should still be a team who can cause you problems. I mean, they're so lifeless that at the moment, the only way I can see them winning a game is through a Cristiano Ronaldo hat trick. So I think it's not worth analysing what United will do. And if you guys want to finish top four this season, this is a game you have to win for me, because United are just there for the picking.
Yeah, I think like you said, United are there for their picking, and it just depends whether Rangnick can get that sort of bounce result from them. I'm hoping he doesn't, and I'm hoping they just I'm hoping that they've checked out for this season. But if you look at the table, they're only 3 points away from top four. So this win brings them even with us and Tottenham for until Tottenham play. So they're not out of it.
Yeah, and they were only 3 points out of top four when they went to Anfield, and look at the performance they put in there. That didn't look like a performance of a team that had any ambitions of finishing in the top four. So as far as United go, you guys have to pick them off if you're going to finish top four, unless Ronaldo does something stupid like scoring a hat-trick.
Yeah, that's the only thing. Like they have that Ronaldo X factor, and if he comes back I'm not sure how much we want to touch on the personal matters going on in his life, and it's sad what's happened. So I feel uncomfortable sort of going there and trying to explore the psyche of a player after something like that happens. So all I'm going to say is if he comes back motivated, then yeah, like that he's the only player that can save that team. So that yeah, I'll leave it at that. But it will definitely be an exciting game to watch. I think
It always is. It's a blue chipper, isn't it?
Look, at least from an Arsenal perspective, because you could say Liverpool United was a blue chipper, but United definitely didn't provide any chips. But so from an Arsenal perspective, it's definitely a blue chipper, considering that we're still entertaining to watch, whereas United are just, like you said, they're dull and lifeless. So I'm predicting a win, probably not a thrashing like what Liverpool gave them, but maybe a hard fought 2-0. I think we definitely won't control the game like Liverpool did, but I think we should get a nice 2-0 win result. I'm predicting for that one.
Sounds reasonable to me. I don't normally go in and score predictions, but 2-0 sounds very plausible to me, and I expect Arsenal to win as well.
Yeah, and the other games that we have going into the weekend, I'm gonna throw this one out. Brentford Tottenham, and just because Brentford is coming off of a couple of good results, like they've beaten Chelsea, they actually thrashed Chelsea. They beat West Ham as well. They beat Watford. They've won 3 games in a row against 2 out of 3 like top 4 teams, pretty much. Like West Ham is a top 4 contender this season, but they've strung together some results. They're playing at Brentford as well. How do you see that one going?
I can't see how it's going to go because who knows what you're going to get from Tottenham. Also, if you want to throw it into the mix, obviously Brentford are in good form at the moment, but who knows what you're also going to see from a team who are pretty much safe and don't have that much to play for in the season. I think it's a little too early to maybe have thoughts of holiday yet. But again, that might be an X factor that is preventing me from seeing how this game's going to go. But really, for me, it's Tottenham. It's trick or treat Tottenham. Which one are we going to get? I think Brentford's back 3 has the ability to cause Tottenham problems just because obviously it gives them an extra man back there. So even if Kane's doing his usual trick, one of the centre-backs should be able to follow him out while still having the cover of 2 other centre-backs, clogging up those channels that Son is now going to want to exploit. But apart from that, I admittedly haven't seen Brentford in a while. I know Eriksen looks like he's come in and they've had a real upturn in form since he's come in as well. So, and I remember especially the game that Liverpool drew at their place. They actually remind me a lot of Sheffield United in that 5-3-2 that they were playing. I'm not 100% sure they're still playing that system. But when they play that 5-3-2, play direct, but not anti-football. They're getting men around the second balls and playing off there. So if they come out with a high intensity, they can absolutely give Tottenham a game. As much because we don't know what we're going to get from Tottenham. At the same time, they were so pale against Brighton. And obviously Brighton favour the 3 at the back as well. So they were able to clog up those channels. And honestly, once those channels were clogged, what did Tottenham? Tottenham had no ideas. I think Conte's really preoccupied with trying to get the defence right, which, again, I've been through this, I think, a few times on the pod. I agree with that mentality to build from the back. But when you do that, when teams play defensive against you, it's they struggle to find the answer. And I guess the contrasting game you can point to is when they played City, because obviously City are a team who like to dominate the game, and they had the answers how to play on the counter attack there. But if Brentford don't particularly want to leave them any spaces to play into, then it'll be really interesting to see what answers Tottenham come up with. And I guess that could lead into a question of, while they're brilliant together, are Kane and Son a little bit one-dimensional in the fact that they need teams to be coming onto them so that they can hit on the counter when they need to break teams down, they don't always seem to have the answers. So that game's really hard for me to really see, and it depends on what Tottenham we get.
Yeah, that's especially after that Brighton result for Tottenham. I thought that they were going to put together a good run of form, because I think they had like they scored 4 or 5 goals in 2 games in a row, albeit against bottom of the half table opposition. But yeah, that Brighton result that really threw a spanner in the works. Look, I'm going to go out and predict Eriksen to score 1-0 win for Brentford.
You sure? Are you wearing your Arsenal scarf right now? Are you sure that's not?
Well, as you know, and this will be a big reveal to our listeners, Brentford was always the team. It's like my second English team. It was always the team that I picked in FIFA Manager mode, especially back in the day when they were in League 2, and I'd always pick them, build the team, and bring them up into the Premier League. So they have a soft spot in my heart. So this would be what's the saying? Even I don't know. I guess it would be even sweeter if Brentford were the team to, I guess, knock Tottenham down a little bit out of the top 4 race, while Arsenal also got a result against United. Like it would be pretty much the perfect weekend for me. So I'm obviously, like, regardless of who they were going to face, I would have been hoping for a Tottenham draw or loss, but it would be even sweeter now with Brentford there. And like you said, if Brentford do play a little bit more defensively, and if Kane and Son can't get that combination, especially on the counter, then yeah, they could look a little bit blunt up front. So who knows how that will go for them? But you'd expect a bounce from Tottenham, considering they lost to Brighton last weekend. Now, there's 2 other pretty juicy fixtures. One of them based on, I guess you can say, based on form or position. The other one based on reputation. The first one is the other London derby, Chelsea West Ham. Now, I fully expect Chelsea to get the result, because West Ham are going into this game with a Europa League semi-final coming up in the middle. I'm pretty sure that's this coming Thursday.
It should be. Champions League games are awesome.
Yeah, so they have a big game against Frankfurt coming up on Thursday. So yes, it's from Sunday to Thursday. They get 3 to 4 days rest, and they don't have to travel to Frankfurt either. They're playing at home. But I expect West Ham to play a slightly weakened team just to not risk injuries, and I expect Tottenham to bounce back from the
Chelsea?
result. Oh, no, it's on. I don't expect Tottenham to bounce. Yeah, I expect Chelsea to bounce back against West Ham.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think Chelsea at home, Chelsea against what should be a weakened West Ham team, and West Ham aren't the deepest squad in the league. I think that's been well documented this season. So I think he has to rest some players. I think the priority isn't to get to the Champions League through the league anymore. It's got to be, especially after Barcelona got knocked out of the competition, it's got to be you got to be looking at the Europa League. So for me, while I have my qualms with what Chelsea have done recently, barring Southampton and the trip to Madrid, I think they should bounce back, and I think they should look to start solidifying and consolidating that third place and make sure that they're not in a top four battle. But I tell you, if they come out as pale as they did against Arsenal, it'd be an easy victory.
Even with a potentially weakened West Ham.
I still don't think it will be easy if they don't bring the right intensity, because there's a potential for West Ham to, while weakened, if they're going to Stamford Bridge, they could sit behind the ball a little bit deeper. So now you're asking the problem of Chelsea: can you break us down? And you need to come with the right intensity, the right mental intensity, and the right technical intensity to do so. So if they don't do that, that obtaining that victory could become hard. So yeah, even with a weaker team, if they don't come ready to fight for that third place and consolidating that third place, and this is the Premier League and this is football and things happen. So while it might be a weakened team, they must come with the right intensity.
Yeah, I agree with that. And look, I do expect Tuchel to get a tune out of them. So I'm obviously expecting a Chelsea win, just surrounding, I guess, the narrative around everything, with West Ham potentially coming into that game slightly weakened, and also they might only play at 80 or 90%, so they don't fully exert themselves going into the more important fixture, and Chelsea to obviously get that bounce back result. So that leads us into, I guess, the final juicy game of the weekend, the Merseyside derby. And personally, look, everything says heart, mind, whatever. Everything says Liverpool are just going to roll over Everton. But, oh man, Everton need a result, especially after Burnley won last night. I think they're only 1 point ahead of Burnley, albeit with a game in hand. But damn, they are cutting it close with where they are in the relegation battle. And I guess for Everton, in the grand scheme of things, this result, or this fixture, isn't the important fixture for them, because they probably expect to lose it anyway. But oh man, they're in such a precarious position right now, and this could be an absolute drubbing from Liverpool. I don't know what you think.
You can see a drubbing, but I personally don't see a drubbing. I think, obviously, I'm going to go back to what I was saying in the lead up to the United game. The fan in me is nervous because, absolutely, as I said before, this is football. They could go there, they could get a point, they could maybe even get a win. I mean, the ball bounces the right way for them all night. There's no reason why they can't get a win, but it's not the expected result. And when you use your head and you use logic, you see a comfortable Liverpool victory. One thing I do expect from Everton is more fight than United put up, a deeper block, and more commitment to at least keeping Liverpool out, if nothing else. But this, you see another team who just aren't great. They have to play away from home, which isn't going to help them, because pretty much all of Lampard's results, I'm pretty sure, have come at Goodison. So, look, I'm not gonna put my neck on the line, especially when you get to this nervous stage of the season as a Liverpool supporter, and you have to play a game against Everton, who have the ability. Well, I wouldn't say the ability, but they have the game to stop you in your tracks. I don't want to tempt fate, but the logical football analysing person in me just can't see any other result but a Liverpool win.
Yeah, I think I'd have to agree with you there. However, I'm going to go for a 1-1 with a Pickford tackle on Van Dijk.
So, are we done? Are we done? Is that the pod? Are we finished?
Look, I think we'll leave it there. There is one other big game this weekend, and that is the Bayern Dortmund game. However, I think the league is pretty much wrapped up there with 4 games to go and a 9-point difference. I'm pretty if Bayern win this, I think they only need to win or draw this to wrap up the league mathematically. So if you have any thoughts on that before we wrap it up, we can finish it on that big game.
No, I don't really. I gave my Dortmund views a week ago, and I've given my Bayern views after they came crashing out of the Champions League. So if it's an interesting game, we both watch it, or one of us watches it, then we can bring up what we found fascinating about it. But yeah, I think you're right. That Bundesliga race is all but over. Even if Dortmund get a win, I mean, makes it a little interesting. But I think Bayern will still get over the line.
Yeah, like especially going into that, they only need a draw or a win to wrap it up. If they do lose, it only prolongs it for another week or even 2 weeks. So yeah, that's I think that's going to be a wrap from us today. Finishing off with I guess that Premier League review, and yeah, we'll see everyone next week. Thanks for coming, and bye for now.